This man might have been the greatest con artist that has ever lived, fooling the FBI for years and cashing millions of dollars. But his real-life story is still a mystery. You might know his story if you've watched the movie Catch Me If You Can, but what you might not know is that the real story isn't like the one portrayed in the movie. Hello Storyticians, today you are going to listen to an incredible story about a young man whose parents had a rough time when he was still a teenager, so he decided to make a life for himself with more than questionable means. We all know that our families are an important part of our lives. It's hard for anyone to suddenly lose a loved one. It might be harder still if you lose a parent, or, as it is the case with this story, if you end up going in different ways from both of your parents instead. That might be challenging on itself, but it's even more difficult for a young teenager. Human beings are strong, but life can also be full of challenges, and this kid really went out of his way to carve his name in the history books. In 1948, baby Frank Abagnale Jr. was born in Bronxville, New York. Holding him in their arms, his parents, Paulette Abagnale and Frank Abagnale Sr., couldn't have possibly known that their little boy would turn out to be one of the most notorious con artists in modern history. The couple met during World War II. Frank Abagnale Sr. was stationed in Oran, Algeria, when he met Paulette. They quickly fell in love and moved back to New York to start a family together. Frank had a happy, stable family in his early childhood. He was especially close with his father, with whom he travelled frequently. Maybe, if it had all stayed this way, Frank would have grown to be a regular city man. Sadly, the couple started to have problems that were threatening their marriage. Frank Sr. travelled a lot, and he was having troubles with his business. In the midst of this crisis, and because of the constant absence of her husband, Paulette decided to leave the family. Rather quickly, the life of Frank Abagnale Jr. changed completely. This was a devastating blow. It hurt him, and it was also hurting his father. Frank Jr., still too young, was forced to make a decision between the two most important people in his life. He had to choose to live with his mother or his father. Shocked by this and uncertain of the right decision to make, Frank chose to live with his father. Their life wasn't ever the same as before, but they still travelled together, and his father took him to work meetings. This was the first exposure Frank had to the high-class business world. In this time, Frank was involved in several not-so-honourable activities. As a teenager, he was involved in committing different crimes, such as stealing and shoplifting. And although he enjoyed himself and was pretty good at it, he decided that he should take it to the next level. He would start to develop the abilities he is, to this day, so widely known for. Sure, there were still crimes in the end, but they were growing more and more sophisticated. For starters, Frank started to take advantage of his father's credit card to make a scam in gas stations. When a customer came to the gas station to fuel up his car and pay, Frank convinced them to pay in cash, and he would pay the gas station with his father's credit card. The not-so-smart part was that he was really scamming his father, who couldn't believe his eyes when he got the credit card bill for thousands of dollars. Frank would then learn that his father was struggling financially. Knowing this, and because of the tensions he felt between his parents, he left the house when he was just 16 years old. At this point, not only did he have no money, but he was also not yet fully educated. He had no work experience, and he was too young for anyone to take him seriously. Once again, he had to rely on his ambition and skills to forge new scams. He first altered who he really was, adding 10 years to his age on his driver's license. Obviously, that wasn't enough. He also lied frequently about his education so he could get better opportunities to survive. Nothing he did seemed enough, so he started to experiment with bank checks. He was able to write and edit checks so he could cash them out and have enough money to live. However, this was a serious crime, and he knew he could get caught at any time. Fearing the long arm of the law, he went into hiding, but his mind was a never-ending stream of ideas and opportunities he thought could help him live a better life, without much care of who he was hurting and which laws he was breaking. Around this time, he came up with the perfect idea. He would impersonate a pilot. With this, bankers would take him seriously, and he would be able to travel around to cash checks or to run from anyone looking for him. Not only that, but he saw how people admired pilots in uniform. He was going to get the respect he cherished so much. He managed to get hold of a Pan American Airways pilot uniform, and the fraud started. To further embrace his new identity, he impersonated a student writing an article about Pan Am, so he could get in contact with the company's directors and learn more about their pilots. With this, he was also able to forge his own identification and licenses to further improve his credibility. He would never have to fly a plane, just use his privileges as a pilot to ride for free and to have the respect and admiration of others. In time, the police and Pan Am were already catching up with his scams, so he decided to change his identity again. Now he became a medical doctor, or at least that was what people thought at the Georgia hospital where he was able to get a job for a short time, though it was not long before he had to leave that place also and change identities once more. As time went on, each identity he forged was uncovered by the authorities faster and faster. For 2 years he was changing his life and job regularly, in the hopes he would never be caught by his lies. He knew justice would make him pay for all of what he had done, and for all the debts he had accumulated through the years of scams and fraudulent activities. Suddenly, everything he wanted changed. He no longer wanted money, admiration and respect. At least, that wasn't his priority anymore. Now, he just wanted to be able to live a normal life and forget all his past crimes. In a last attempt to reach this dream, he moved to France. Yet, trying to live a normal life was a hard challenge to ask of someone who'd spent their youth breaking laws, being hunted by the authorities, and being $2.5 million in debt. This is when it all ended. A woman from his past, an ex-girlfriend, recognized him and reported him to the authorities. He was sent to prison, serving sentences in France, Sweden, and the United States. Sadly, his father would pass before they ever had the chance to reunite. With time, Frank was offered the opportunity to serve his prison sentence in another way. He was granted parole in exchange for information. After having been chased by the FBI, he was now offered a job as a fraud and scam expert. Frank Abagnale Jr. accepted this deal. He then worked with the FBI for more than 30 years, serving as a top expert in preventing document fraud, forgery, and check swindling. Still quite an entrepreneur, he started his own company that helps people prevent becoming victims of fraud. Maybe it didn't turn out that badly for that young kid from Bronxville, New York. Sounds like a happy ending. But most of what we know about this life comes from Frank Abagnale Jr.'s own narrative. Just recently, journalist Alan C. Logan challenged this narrative. In his book, The Greatest Hoax on Earth, Catching Truth While We Can, he investigates Frank's real story, and he proposes that the biggest con he ever did was making people believe that this crazy story was actually his life. What do you think? Was Frank Abagnale Jr. the greatest scammer that has ever lived? Was his greatest hoax fooling banks, hospitals and airlines? Or was it fooling everyone who believed his side of the story? Here is where today's story ends. If you're anything like us at all, you can't get enough of these incredible tales. We're sure you'll like this one. A paraglider was blown up 20,000 feet by freezing cold winds. Her body reacted in a way that doctors couldn't explain. Click on this card to watch that now. If you like what we're doing here, please consider becoming a Storytician by subscribing to this channel. Now, go live the most interesting story of all. The story of your life. See you next time.